We've talked about Elizabeth I's reign and the immediate aftermath, but what about the longer-term impact? How did history remember her?
Elizabeth's legacy is deeply rooted in what came to be known as the Elizabethan Age. Even long after her death, she was remembered as a symbol of English resilience, cultural blossoming, and national pride. Her reign became a sort of golden standard for what a monarch could achieve.
Exactly, Jessie. And she wasn't just a political figure. Elizabeth I left her mark on English literature, drama, and the arts. She was a patron of the arts, and under her, playwrights like William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe flourished. It's no wonder that her era is still romanticized.
It sounds like she was an inspiration for artists and writers at the time.
She was, Chris. Elizabeth used her image very effectively. She cultivated an aura of power and independence that appealed to many people. Her portraits show her in elaborate clothing, often with symbols of power like globes or swords, reinforcing the idea that she was in control.
And don't forget about the religious aspect. Elizabeth was also seen as the Protestant champion. After her victory over the Spanish Armada, she was hailed as a defender of the Protestant faith. That imagery stuck with her legacy, especially given how divided Europe was at the time between Catholics and Protestants.
So she was seen as a cultural, political, and religious figure all at once. That's impressive.
Yes, and that's why her image persisted for so long. Even in the Victorian era, centuries later, Queen Victoria looked back to Elizabeth as a model for her own reign. Elizabeth I was portrayed as the ultimate female monarch, and that image was used to promote British imperialism and national identity during the 19th century.
It's fascinating how each generation found different ways to look back at Elizabeth. During the 19th century, with the rise of the British Empire, Elizabeth became a symbol of Britain's expansion and dominance. And in the 20th century, she was often remembered for her personal independence and strength, especially in the context of women's rights movements.
It sounds like her legacy evolved over time, but were there any criticisms of her reign? Or was it all positive?
That's a good point, Chris. While Elizabeth I is remembered positively by many, there were criticisms too. For one, she was known to be indecisive at times, especially when it came to naming a successor. Her refusal to address the succession left a lot of anxiety in the country, and some historians argue that she could have done more to prepare England for what came next.
And then there's the issue of her handling of Ireland. The 9 Years' War was a brutal conflict, and Elizabeth's forces were often ruthless in their suppression of Irish rebels. It's a dark chapter in her reign that sometimes gets overshadowed by her successes elsewhere.
So, it wasn't all smooth sailing during her reign. There were challenges and conflicts she couldn't entirely resolve.
Exactly. Like any monarch, she had her share of failures and mistakes. But overall, her ability to stabilize England, maintain her independence, and foster a cultural renaissance far outweighed the negative aspects of her reign for most historians.
And I think that's why she's still so celebrated today. Her reign was complex, but it left a lasting mark on England and on the world. Even now, her legacy is felt in everything from British political institutions to the English language and culture.
It's amazing to think how one person could have such a long-lasting impact. From what you're saying, it sounds like her reign shaped much of modern England.
It did. Elizabeth's reign set the stage for England's rise as a global power. Her reign wasn't without challenges, but she showed that a monarch could balance power, diplomacy, and culture in a way that defined a nation.
Her era also set the tone for the centuries that followed. England's cultural, political, and military development during and after her reign shaped the nation's identity in profound ways. It's no coincidence that she's remembered as one of the greatest monarchs in English history.
Wow, I've learned so much about her. It sounds like Elizabeth I was not just a queen, but a symbol of a pivotal time in history.
She really was, Chris. Elizabeth I represented an age of exploration, artistic achievement, and political stability, all while navigating the difficulties of ruling as a woman in a man's world. Her legacy is as enduring as it is inspiring.
And that's what makes her such a fascinating figure, even today. People still look to her story for lessons in leadership, perseverance, and independence.
Thank you both so much for walking us through the life and legacy of Elizabeth I. I feel like I understand her reign so much better now.
It was a pleasure, Chris. Elizabeth I is one of those figures who continues to captivate historians and the public alike.
Absolutely. Her legacy is one of strength, cultural richness, and resilience, and it's been great to share her story with you.